Hey creatives, as requested, here are some card making ideas, and as we are so close to Christmas, it's officially December, I've checked the calendar and everything, I thought we'd do 4 last minute Christmas cards that recycle packaging. And I'm going to be using the packaging as my main focal points. So I have some tissue paper and some corrugated cardboard that I've saved from various packaging. I'll also be using some parcel string too. Now for the card blanks, I've got some pre-folded cards, and you can find links to these in the description below. But you can fold your own cardstock, and if you have some already, then use that. Other handy items are paints. Now I'm using cheap acrylic paints, but you could easily use poster paints as well, they would be great. And you'll need some brushes, and again they don't have to be expensive, just ordinary craft brushes. Now some double-sided tape would be handy, but if you don't have any you can use sellotape. And your favourite clear drying glue is perfect, so a cheap paper PVA would work just fine. For tools, a pencil and scissors are needed. And if you have them, then a hole punch and a paper trimmer would be super handy. But if you don't have them, you can just use the scissors instead. Now as you see later, I'm going to be printing out my sentiments, but you could write them or stamp them, so lots of options. Now if you need to save time, then a top tip is to batch make your cards, and this is where you just batch together the similar jobs. So for instance, cut everything all out at once and then move on to painting it all in one go. And that's exactly how I'm going to be making these cards, so it kind of means that you'll be able to follow along step by step if you're using this video as a guidance for making your cards. So each card design will become a lot clearer at the end of the video. So after you've checked your packaging and taken off any sellotape or anything that's going to get in your way, then we can start using it. I'm starting here on what I'm going to call the Merry Christmas card, and this is a really super simple and quick design. As you can see, I'm drawing out a panel to fit the card blank on the back of the corrugated card, but I'm doing it at an angle. And this is because I want the corrugations to run diagonally on the card. This is a total design shortcut. Design tip number 1, diagonal lines are much more dynamic and exciting for the eye than vertical or horizontal lines. All of them have their uses, but if you want to just shortcut an interesting look, then go for diagonal lines. I've just roughly cut out my panel and I'll trim these edges later, but I wanted a nice crinkle inside edge, so I tore that, and now I'm just removing the top layer to expose the corrugations. And you can lever off that top piece using anything strong, like the pair of scissors like I'm using here, or a brush handle, that works as well, tweezers, anything that you can get in between the corrugations. Right, time to cut out the focal point for the next card, and this card I'm going to call Noel. For this card I want a Christmas tree to be the focal point. And again, I'm just roughly drawing around the card blank on the back of the corrugated card, just to give me an idea of the size that I want my tree to be. And then I'll just draw and cut out a very simple triangle shape. And I'm making sure again that my corrugations are going to run diagonally in this tree. And when you're cutting out, it's a lot easier to cut around the shape first, so you're taking off the excess pieces of card, and then you can go in and trim it down to your precise shape. And once you have your shape, you can remove the top layer to show your corrugations. For this card, I'm going to mount the tree on a white panel, so I just need to trim down the cardstock to fit the card blank. Now I don't tend to precisely measure my panels. What I usually do is work by eye, so I'll hold the panel against the card blank and mark off where I want to cut to get the look I'm going for, and then just use my trimmer. But if you don't have a trimmer, then measure it and then cut it out with scissors or use a craft knife, whatever you're more comfortable with. Let's cut out the focal point for card number 3, the Joy card. I want a circle for this one, and if you have dies or punches, then use those, but if not, try drawing a freehand circle. And I got this tip from Fine Arts Tips channel. Use one finger as a pivot, keep the distance between the pivot and your pencil the same, then move the paper around to get your circle. And I'll link up the Fine Arts Tips video below so that you can watch their circle drawing tips, because they have 3 of them and they're really great. So I can cut that out and then move on to my last focal point for card number 4, which I'm going to call To You. Now for this card I'm going to make a gift card pocket, and I'm going to do it in the shape of a stocking. So just as with the other cards, I've drawn around the card blank, and that gives me a good idea of what size I'll need to make my stocking. Then I've sketched out the shape. Now for the stocking, I need to remember that I need enough room to put the gift card in, but I don't want to make the stocking so big that it won't fit the card blank. Once I finish the sketch, then I'll just cut it out and I'll give it another test and see how big it is on the card front, and if I need to, I'll trim it down a little bit further. It's better to cut it out slightly bigger than you need than to cut it out too small. And once I'm happy, I will then take off that top layer just as I did with the others. Now that I have all my focal points cut out, it's on to the next stage, and that is to paint them all up. And I'm going to start with the white, and that I'm going to add to the corrugated panel in my Merry Christmas card to make it look a little bit like snow and frost. And for this, I don't want to completely cover that corrugated card, so I'm just dry brushing it over the texture just to highlight those corrugations a little bit more and add even more texture to it. I'm then going to move on to anything that requires a red colour. So starting with my hand-drawn circle, which is going to be a bauble, so I'm going to use light and dark shades to make it look a little bit more like a sphere. And having a couple of different tones of red paint will help with this, but if you don't have them, then you can just use white to add highlights. So whilst the red was still fresh, I then went on and did the stripes to my stocking. And those corrugations really help with that. And I'll just finish that off with some green, and I've also cut out a toe and a heel using the stocking itself as a template, and I'll colour those green too, before moving on to the tree and painting that green. And again, I've used a few different tones just to give it a little bit more interest. So there's 2 different tones of green and some white in there as well. Now I also want to colour the string, and to do that I'm going to paint it. So first off, I just want to make sure that I get the correct amount, so I'm just measuring it up, and I need some for the tree and also some for the bauble and my stocking. And the tree is going to be red, and the other string I'm going to paint gold. And when you're painting this, you just got to make sure you cover all of the sides of the string. So roll it over as you're working on it, and keep checking that you've covered everything. Once I've coloured all of my string and all of my pieces, then it's just a case of letting them dry, and we'll move on to putting the cards together. So I'm just going to start off with the tree card Noel, and I'm sticking down one end of the coloured string onto the back, and then I'm just going to wrap it all the way round and stick the other end down as well. And if you're worried about making your card too thick, you could always try just zigzagging the string on the front and gluing them in place instead. Once I've done that, I'm using double-sided tape again just to stick the tree onto the card front. And again, you can use glue instead. And that card's almost finished. All it needs now is the sentiment. So next up is the Merry Christmas card, and for this I want to use some of that gold string to decorate it. Now you could always use a stapler to attach the string to the panel, or you could wrap it like we did with the tree. But to save on string, what I'm going to do is I'm going to zigzag 3 threads on the front, make them slightly larger than the panel, and then I'm going to stick down one end on the back, so it just makes it easier to line up the 3 strings. And then you can stick the other end down on the back as well. And you want to make sure that you don't have them so tight that they fold and curl that panel, but you don't want them so loose that they just look a little bit slack. But before I stick the last end down, I do put one twist into the threads, and you'll see when I come to put the sentiment on why I do that. Then I can stick that panel down and we can move on to the stocking card. For the stocking, I just want to add a little bit of white trim, so I'm going to use the tissue paper for this, and I've just torn off a strip, and I'm going to fold it up and then curl it up so that it fits that top of that stocking. And I can stick that down again with some double-sided tape, or if you don't have any, then use some glue. And once I'm at it, I'm also going to stick down the toe and the heel in exactly the same way. The stocking trim is also going to get some gold braiding, with 3 pieces of string zigzagged in the front and then stuck on the back, just as I did with the Merry Christmas card panel. And don't forget, if the visuals are going a little bit too fast for you, then you can always slow them down in the settings menu on the video. I'm covering a lot of ground today, and I didn't want you hanging around watching a video for hours and hours when you could be creating. But feel free to let me know if I've got the balance right, just give me a shout, tell me in the comments, and also if you've been finding this video useful, helpful in any way, then please do like it. I know, I ask every time, but it really does help, and I massively appreciate everyone who does it. Also, if you're not already a subscriber, then do consider subscribing for more art craft tips every week, and any shares of the video are hugely appreciated as well, so thank you everyone. Now don't forget that when you come to stick the stocking down that you're making it into a pocket. So if you're using double-sided tape, that's really easy to do. Just measure it up with the card that you're going to use already inside it. And if you're using glue, very much the same principle, so just be aware of that. You don't want to stick it down and then realise that you can't get the card in. For the Joy Bauble card, I decided that I would write the sentiment out in string, and here's some tips on how to do that. First, write out the sentiment on cardstock and cover this with double-sided adhesive tape. Then trace the writing with string, and it's a lot easier to use unpainted string for this as it's more flexible. Once you have the string sentiment, paint it. The paint will help stick it in place. And you're going to need 2 to 3 layers of paint, making sure that the layers are dry before adding a new layer. And the adhesive tape won't cover so well with the first layer, but after a couple of layers it will start to cover okay. I'm going to attach the bauble itself to a panel of card so that it's free moving and can slide around. So I can use some of that already painted gold string to do that, and just attach it on the back with some double-sided tape or just some ordinary sticky tape. And I've got some gold painted cardstock that I'm just going to trim down into a little neck piece for the bauble, and I'll stick that on with glue. The final touches for this card is to cut out that string sentiment, and I'm also going to add a bow as well, which I'll just make from some leftover painted gold string. And I can stick both of those to the bauble using glue and stick the whole panel to the card front, and that's that card finished. Next up, we're back to the stocking card, and I've got a really handy tip for making a very quick tag. So here's one of the sentiments that I've printed out, and I've just trimmed it so it will fit my card. So if I just trim off one corner but keep that piece and match it up perfectly to the other corner, then you can use that as a guideline to where to cut, and you'll have a perfectly matching tag. And all you need to do is to put a hole in it. To finish this card, I'm going to use a piece of gold painted string to attach the tag to the top of the stocking, and I'll also add a tiny touch of glue to the back just to hold the tag in place. And before I show you the final cards, here's why I like to put a twist in my strings. So I'm just adding another piece of thread to this one and tying it over where that twist is, and then I can fan out the strings into a lovely shape. And the twist just makes it look more organic and natural than if you just had 3 lines tied in the middle. Try it and see, and you can see which you prefer. So there you go, 4 Christmas card ideas using recycled packaging and a little bit of bits and pieces as well. But hopefully they're mostly things you've already got in your craft stash or around your house. I shall be back soon with some more art and craft tip videos. In the meantime, here's some suggestions for other things you can watch from my channel. Thanks very much for watching this one, and I'll see you next time.